Good evening. You are listening live to the Extreme Movie Show. I am your host, Rob, broadcasting to you from the Pine Hills Palace, just west of Orlando, Florida. I have on the vine from the great Midwest RDV. And tonight, RDV, I got to say happy birthday, but not to you. It's a very special happy birthday. It's going out to the one special 63-year-old known as JCVD, Jean-Claude Van Damme. And the reason why I mention this, RDV, is because before we get into your initial take of our film, the 1987 Monster Squad, a movie that actually a lot of people don't seem to talk about, I found myself watching this movie, and I said, I got to ask RDV this tonight. Have you ever watched a movie that as soon as it's on, you go, okay, I remember this. Okay, I remember that scene. I don't know what's coming next, but yeah, that makes sense. Okay, I remember that. But then you realize you totally don't know when you ever saw this movie or that you even saw it, because if you never asked anything about it, you'd be like, yeah, it's the one with the kids and the creatures. Because you know what? That's what this movie is for me. That's what this movie was. I mean, that's how I feel about it, but I
Yeah.
like it. I think it's okay. What's your initial take?
This is my second time watching. I watched this when I was 12 years old. So at that point I had a crush on the one kid's older sister,
Okay.
the one that turns out to be the virgin. And I thought the kid on the bicycle was so cool. You know, he's got the leather jacket, lights his match off the bottom of his shoe, lit his cigarette. I was like, I couldn't believe it. I'm like, it's an '80s movie that's for kids that has swearing in it,
The
and
Virgin
like and,
Connie Swale.
and like adults as far as humor or stuff. You know, people dying, exploding. I'm like, oh my gosh! It's like, and I remember going back a couple years later after that when I was like 18 or 19, going back and looking at this movie, just reading up on it, and just the fact that it was a flop, and I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe this was a flop.
Yeah.
For how big of a cult following this movie has. I mean, I personally enjoyed it. I think people are just to the point where if you're hating on this movie, you just hate enjoyment in general. I'm sure Pixel probably could find a way to hate it though. They'll say it's bad acting.
Well,
Fake excited to look real.
one of the things we talk about here in the Extreme Movie Show, no matter what we're talking about, and we joke
Yeah.
a little bit, but sometimes I'll point out like food or fashion or stuff with the 80s, being an 80s kid and you're a
Mhm.
90s kid, and he's a 2000s kid, right? Or
Yeah.
2010, really.
He's 1999. I think he was born, or 98.
Yeah, so he's the baby of the show. But
He's the
here's the thing.
2000s. Yeah, that's just, yeah.
We like to point out these different perspectives, because one thing that I totally forgot about 80s movies, and it comes crystal clear when you're watching them, is that let's talk about Stranger Things for a second. You know how they have the younger
Yeah.
daughter that's like a little character, and everyone thought she was precocious and rambunctious and cute. She's just kind of a foul mouth, whatever. I didn't mind her, but then she became a bigger part of like the next season, whatever it was. In the 80s, you had the occasional film that had, from what I would call the family perspective, and I don't mean the high schoolers. There's plenty of high school movies and some really good ones and interesting ones. There's a few junior high, as my day would call it, but now it's middle school movies, and I think this is what this is, because as an adult watching it, I go, eh. But as a kid watching it, I think it's cool that you have this like preteen, sort of young teenager type
Yeah.
movie with people with roles, and not just the boys in the group, but maybe the girls in this case in this movie, or like you'd see a little bit. And to your point, they have their own version of what it's like to be, the 1955, hey Fonzie, sit on the guy that wears the leather jacket and might smoke a cigarette or whatever, which you'd still have in high school, of course. And so I thought this was kind of an innocent film that way. Like, I don't think it's certainly deep or
Yeah,
provocative.
it was. It's just that this takes place in 1987. They make reference to Miami Vice there. So I
They
already
do. Got that.
I popped when I heard that. Like, oh, Miami Vice, yeah. Damn kids, he's watching a good show. 12 years old. Yeah, this movie was set in the 80s. So I mean, I like the fact that you had it wasn't like over the top, but it was still kind of like what you expect from a movie from Disney stuff. Disney people love Hocus Pocus. There's another movie it's not really the best but for some reason that's got a huge cult following. I don't know if that was a flop or not, but apparently they made a sequel to that because why they want to ruin our childhood. Yeah, so I mean, I was looking up who wrote this. Shane Black, Lethal
Yep.
Weapon,
That's right.
Long Kiss Goodnight. It explains why the cops were so badass in this.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say because I love this. I love this movie because for being universal, basic creatures, monsters, all together in one film.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's
Yeah,
cool.
and then teaming up and going against a bunch of kids, which you think would be a Halloween movie. No, that makes sense. It's a kids movie, but it's also for preteens or for teens as well, preteens and teens. Uh, I love the Dracula here too. And I can't think myself as I'm watching this. I'm like, man, if they were to rebooted this in the '90s, Rob Lowe would have been perfect as Dracula. You know, he just has that Dracula as face.
Because
And
this is not a horror movie.
no, it's not. It's meant to be. It's supposed to be like a comedy slash
Yeah,
Halloween movie.
yeah,
So when I think of this, it's not Lost Boys. Lost
no,
Boys is straight up horror. Is that this is kind of like Scooby Doo, in a sense, which I really I found this to be this wholesome. Everyone in here, and there's even because it's the '80s, the old man who they thought he was creepy turns out to be a former he was a Jewish prisoner, or he used to be, or he survived the concentration camp because you see the numbers on his arm,
yeah,
and he speaks German. That's how he speaks German because he's a survivor, and he helps out the kids,
right,
because there's this journal that Abraham Van Helsing has that basically it's written in German, and it's basically it explains how to open up a portal using this diamond or this gem, amulet that Dracula wants to get his hand on. And what it does, it getting a virgin girl to say this, these words that are in German, and opens up a portal to limbo. And that's kind of what you see in the very beginning. You see Abraham Van Helsing and all his men are storming Dracula's castle. He's got Abraham Van Helsing's got his little, I think his granddaughter, I think, or his niece or something. And they open the portal and they get sucked into the rift. Dracula somehow survives. Now, I say that was kind of cool for being that, the set and everything. And then we're immediately, taken to these kids. But then afterwards, you see there's this plane, it's old like a B-52 bomber from World War II. These guys are delivering caskets, and I'm like, oh no. And kids, yes, this is where we get the kind of the humor starts just to feel it, more of the Dracula humor. Dracula shows up, tosses the guy around. The guy's like, well, I'm just gonna drop him out, And Dracula just turns into it just hovers there and turns into a bat, and you see the glowing. Like I said, I love the bats, especially in the very beginning of Dracula's castle. They're just little the bats you'd see in the Muppets. They just bounce up and down and the wings flapping.
yeah,
You can tell they're fake, but I love props, man. And there was, like I said, this is all props. Everything
yeah,
you see in this,
yeah. There's
I,
very little special effects in here, and what special effects there are kind of cheesy or whatever. But you
yeah,
know what they are at the time, but they're not. It's not over the top. It's not horrible green screen like you have in these $200 million budgeted movies today, where as impressive it might look, it's a 2D kind of feel, no matter how much they try to make it look
yeah,
3D
$18
with
million.
people.
dollars.
There's no connection with the environment, and that's something that's so blatantly
Yeah,
obvious. And you're right about the effects too, because the practical effects in here, again, they're not really scary, but the idea of that somehow kids who see things that adults can't in their own ways now have to go up against all these creatures kind of all at once, and maybe they join them, maybe they don't. It's harmless, it's not gory, it's not violent. And I want to say it came out, I think, 87 in the summer, and it flopped. But the thing about it is that you look at films like E.T. that were wildly successful, and they kind of have a little bit of this theme to it. Obviously, Goonies is one that's going to get
hmm
compared to. I just think that this is still not a bad movie. The timing of it may have been too wrong, because you and I have talked about there's very little wholesome films out there, and early Disney may have had some of those in some films, even though they may have had some adult themes to them. And obviously,
yeah,
Disney's completely changed course over the last generation. And it did strike me that it's a shame that after this movie you kind of don't really see kids prevalent that much, because the 80s is one thing. Either you had the over the top blood, guts, gore, obscene kind of stuff like it,
yeah,
you had your mainstream movies like it, but it was all about having fun. And I think that tone has lost a lot in movies today. And with the kids in it especially, I go, there's a lot of preteen stuff on Netflix and everywhere else, but it's almost lacking that fun element to it. Even Stranger Things gets a little bit dark, but not scary. But it's like you
yeah.
guys aren't having any fun.
The other movie that when you look at this up is on Google. Look this movie up. The recommended movies is Fright Night, and I kept thinking about that. And now this, I would watch Fright Night. I'd watch this. This, like I said, these are you're not big blockbuster hits, but they are solid stories. Uh, the whole thing is Dracula wants his amulet, so he can just have, be triumphant and have monsters rule the world, forever. And it's up to these group of kids, basically, they call themselves the Monster Squad, to basically to stop them, stop Dragon. And you see, I gotta say, I'll mention this. When I watched this as a kid, I thought they like, oh, the one kid's older sister was hot. Now watching it again, I'm like, man, the mom's hot.
Yeah, you notice things that you didn't notice back then. And in a cute sort of way too, not the Stifler's mom sort of thing where they shove
No,
it in your face. Not where it's
and the
meant to
fact they
be
bring
that
up
way.
Miami Vice, I go back to like Crockett's wife. She's upset because in this movie, she's upset. This woman upset that her husband is a cop and he's always constantly doing a job, and she's like, "I'm important too." And I'm like, "You know what you signed up for? You got this." It's like, uh, so I kept thinking like, it's just like Crockett's wife can't stand the fact that he's a cop. It's like, why do you marry them?
Yeah, and the thing too, like you brought Miami Vice a few times. They do reference in there because it was the super hot sleeper hit
Yeah,
show that actually after the first season was not doing great. Kind of caught on in reruns in 84, 85,
which
85, I
sucks.
think, the summer, and then it blew up season two. And this movie came out like a year later when everybody's watching Miami Vice. The jackets were out. The
Yeah,
electric razors that would give you the 6 o'clock shadow on your
yep,
chin
yep.
was an item. The jackets, the glasses, all that. But the other thing about it too is that we mentioned before one of the key things of 80s films, and we definitely see this in a canon film. You get your action sequence, and by that I mean your montage with music and putting things together. And
Hmm.
here it's the kids doing it, like making the stakes and getting ready for the big
Yeah,
battle. And I'm like, okay, that's kind of cute.
the
You
shop
know what you're
class.
getting, but you see the kids doing it. I liked it.
And who was stealing everything? It was the kid who smokes the cigarettes. It was the Fonz
He's
kid.
going into the archery club and like no one's gonna see him standing out,
He's
and
making
he
the
just
silver
grabs them
bullets in
all
metal
himself.
class. Yeah, and the mom's like, "Where's my silverware go?" Because they took her silverware, her probably really expensive silverware, and melted it down into the silver bullets. How he got the molding for actual a bullet, I still don't know how. But yeah, he makes the bullets. He's also the one that sharpens the stakes in
Yep,
the wood shop because he's the junior,
yep.
so that he's only in his access. 12-year-olds don't have access of. But let's talk about Horace for a second and his
Okay,
bullies.
eat it. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I forgot what his name is. The guy from Wonder Years, older brother. I can't remember what his name is,
The
but
Wonder Years guy, the older brother.
oh, but he's in here too. And there's this kid, this fat kid. He's like a horse, and they really call him names. They use it. They call him a derogatory gay slur. Call him fat. So hey, fat boy, and all that stuff. And they knock his and they basically these two bullies confront him on the recess, in the playground, and they knock his Snicker bar on the ground. I'm like, oh, that's a perfectly good Snicker bar, you bastards.
Yeah.
And they step on it, and then so it's like, and then the kid has a comic book. I'm thinking like, as a comic collector, I know how much those are worth. Some of those are worth now,
Yeah.
especially if they're like uh, low print numbers or just the fact that they're in good condition to keep them. But anyway, they rip his comic book in half. Is because he basically the horse says because you guys are stupid, I'd be fat, but you guys are stupid, and he's like, oh, I'm sorry, rips it up, and so the kid shows also. This is the first introduction to the kid. I forget what his name is, but he's basically the Fonz kid. Shows up, and you see the bicycle and the playing card in the spokes.
Yeah.
He stops and he skids, and then you see a close up of his shoe, and you see him take a match strike against you, and you see it slowly get the match go up, and he's lighting a cigarette on the school property. I love it. He's got the leather jacket on throughout the whole entire movie. Even when he's in wood shop, he had the leather jacket on. Like in school,
Well,
they left.
there's still in the 80s. There's still a lot of leather. There's still a lot of denim. There's still
Yeah, but are you
corduroy.
allowed to wear?
There's just a big, huge mix of fashion.
I don't think you could wear leather jackets in
You
wood
can,
shop.
and people did. The
Wow,
only thing with
that's
wood shop is, you might not wear gloves if it's cold because you don't want them to catch them in the table
yeah,
saw, those kinds of things, right? So,
yeah.
um, but
Yeah,
it's
so
you know what I mean.
yeah, so anyway, so yeah, he goes up there and makes the bully basically. He's like, He's like, dude, you need to basically eat your, what was the guy's name? I can't remember what the bully's name was, but he basically the guy who played the older brother on Wonder Years. He makes him eat the Snickers bar because they're all afraid of him for whatever reason. We never established, but he's supposed to be the bad
Because
guy.
he's the man,
Yeah,
and all of them
yeah,
succumb to the
they're
fact
like
that he's in
ew,
charge.
but I guess that was fun. Then we get a follow up scene with Horace and his bullies later at the end of the movie where the Wolfman's coming towards not the Wolfman, it was the creature from the Black Lagoon, and these cops are knocked over or supposed probably dead for all I know because there's a lot of cop deaths in this movie. Shane Black, I don't know why, but you're just killing cops. Um, but yeah, so Horace, he sees the shotgun, he grabs it out, and he's being stalked by the creature of Black Lagoon, which somehow can survive out of water for that long. I don't know how, but it's magic, I guess. Uh, and he basically grabs the shotgun, and he's like, and he goes, he sees the two boys in the diner. He's like, "Let me in, let me in." Like, no, and they're cowering. It's all of a sudden he turns around, he has a shotgun, aims it, and he goes out and he pulls the trigger. And all of a sudden, it's like, he's like a badass. I love he gets his confidence. The bullies are like, "Oh, that was, he's like, oh, that was cool." And he's like, he cocks gun, "Don't mess with me, I'm Horace." It was, like I said, it was funny. The jokes, with
Juvenile.
yeah, they're very juvenile jokes. There was one of the kid actually here played Eugene. And Eugene, I did not know this, is actually Michael Faustino, Bud Bundy.
That's who that. Yes,
Yes.
damn it, I couldn't put that together. I'm like, I know this fucker.
Tom Noonan plays Frankenstein.
Yeah,
This, like I said, the whole cast was kind of like, I was like a bunch of nobodies, except for Michael Faustino. I don't see anything from anybody else. I mean, Robert Kiger played Patrick. Sean was Andrew Gower. Ashley Bank was Phoebe. Uh, but there's really nobody in no name, like big names that I know. I can going through the cast list. Oh, Jason Harvey played EJ. Hervey, that's what his name is.
Hervey. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and then
And
yeah,
I don't know if he's the same TV guy with that name that like makes a gazillion
but
dollars and stuff. But yeah,
what do you think of Stan Shaw? His character, he was the dad's partner, the black cop. Maybe it's in here, with the stereotypical cop, and just was making jokes. It's kind of like an Arsenio Hall like wannabe.
yeah. The whole we talked about before, backing up here a little bit on some of the TV shows, season ones we've done, about how something like, say, The Fugitive or The Incredible Hulk, it's an episode of the week, and you have somebody traveling where a new adventure can start up right. You begin, finish, and end. You don't have to have a giant meta
Mhm.
arcing theme or world build, and that was pretty standard going up even to today, actually. But definitely 60s, 70s, 80s TV, and I think it started to change a little bit in the 90s. One of the other things that kind of come up with this too, is, and we've mentioned this before, is that cops were starting to be made to look like inefficient government agents. During our Dirty Harry series talk, we definitely pointed that out. But then in the 80s, I've mentioned a few times, because we haven't done a lot of 80s TV or movie. We've done a lot of movies, but not TV. We've mentioned how cops are made to look stupid, like they're fat. They're they're what the fat kid used to be a part of your group, and he'd be the fun jokester kind of guy, like Chunk in the Goonies, right? And then, but the later on, it got to be, well, you're fat, you're not a good person because you're fat or whatever, and make you feel like shit. Kind of like almost happened here, but it was the kids bully thing, so it's not a big deal to me. But somewhere along the way, Dad's gone from being the pride of the family, the source of wisdom, to a guy just sitting in the chair in the living room with his head hidden behind a newspaper, not saying anything and
Mhm.
being stupid. And you see that also with cops and buddy stuff. For some reason, they took the partner sort of concept here with cops, like from Lethal Weapon and everything, and they've made it
Yeah.
where you would have the other guy just being a complete jokester. And I was not actually the biggest fan of that, because I always liked it when two people were kind of equals, in that one's really strong in one area,
Mhm.
one might be strong in another, like Starsky and Hutch. I always joke about T.J. Hooker, because Hooker, as Shatner, is an experienced cop, but the people around him were competent. And here we get kind of this goofy sort of relationship, and I don't know, I didn't hate it, but it didn't work for me. And I think when you have a juvenile film like this, it's not really supposed to be scary, but again, done really well. You want it to be good in all areas. This area was a little weak to me.
Yeah. So I just realized something. The mother here, Mary, was played by Mary Ellen Trainor. If you remember, she's
Goonies.
in Goonies as well.
Yep.
And she also was a psychiatrist. I believe that was she dating what's his name in Lethal Weapon? But I know she was in Lethal Weapon though.
She's the
Definitely,
psychiatrist. I don't know if I haven't. It's
yeah,
been a while, so I don't know if she
yeah,
was
yeah.
dating
She
him
was
or not.
Stephanie Woods in the Lethal Weapon films. She's also in Die Hard. She was the newscaster,
Yeah.
and also in Ricochet. Yeah, but she was the mom in Goonies. So this was her movie before Goonies, because Goonies came out. Actually, no, Goonies came out before this. Goonies was 85, and then yeah, this was 87 or yeah, right around there. So yeah, died in 2015, 62 years old.
There was a
Young.
show I did watch called Parker Lewis Can't
Yeah.
Lose.
Oh, I
Um,
remember that movie
and she's in it.
or show.
She's I
Yeah,
think the mom or whatever.
yeah.
So I thought that was kind of an interesting show, and it was. And I'm mentioning that too, not only because she was in it, because as I said, in the '80s going to '90s, there's definitely a shift culturally, like not just the
Mhm.
music changing where um, rap became not just pop music. It became um, obviously a lot more widespread, and I suppose all the different types allegedly and all that East Coast, West Coast, that kind of thing, going into the '90s and the hardcore stuff that was mainstream. But then you also had a change in TV shows too, with a bit more of I, I don't know what you want to call the '90s. If you want to call it emo or what,
Right.
because you still had an emo thing in the '80s, but it was just a bit more prevalent. And some of the comedy stuff was a little different. It wasn't just the three jokes. Every third line is a joke sitcom stuff. And I don't know. I think by the time the '90s started rolling out, and you had something like Parker Lewis Can't Lose. I'm like, yeah, I just don't know what direction this is all going into. So it's kind of a weird time, the late '80s,
Yeah.
early '90s. That's why I think this movie, if it came out maybe a couple years early, if this came out before Goonies, and let's say Goonies still came out, I think people might feel differently about this film, because I
Because
have to say
Goonies, yeah,
this:
yeah.
it looks so damn good.
It
It
is.
holds up. It's got kids in it. Now, if you're going to see a kids movie like this, you might get one every other year on Netflix that's like a one shot or something, and some of them I can't remember their names, and it almost reminds me of these types of movies. But I kind of feel like that even with as popular as the Goonies were, that there's a shortage of these junior high innocent kids, not preteen, sexual themes and all that kind of crap that you get with the high school stuff out there. And I just kind of wish there were. And I felt there's a few of them in the '80s, but it's very sparse. I mean,
Yeah,
I just hate to say it, and that's one reason why I think this movie does stand out, is because it's a clean movie. Your kids could watch it. It's wholesome enough. Is it a little juvenile? Yeah, but then again, so was Ace Ventura or anything Jim Carrey's done, and who's gonna complain about that, right? So I don't know. I think if you want something lighthearted, not too scary, if you like all that stuff, this is fine. But like I've told you before, I hate the term horror comedy. This is not a horror film. It's a
yeah,
Halloween film, but it's a cute Halloween film, and there's
yeah.
nothing wrong with having a lighthearted, cute Halloween film that kids can enjoy.
Yeah, so I'm looking over the guy who played Abraham Van Helsing in this, Jack Willem, died in 2001, but apparently he was in The Curse of the Mummy back in 1964. He was in a lot of these old British stuff, like sort of Sherwood Forest, Flame Over India with Lauren Bacall.
Yep,
Uh, he was
they
also,
got good names.
but you know who he was? I know him for more. Is in 19 I believe it was 1980, a movie called Clash of the Titans. He was Poseidon.
Oh, that's a great one too.
Yeah,
That's a lot of fun.
yeah,
Wow.
but yeah. So just going through the cast list in here, like some of these are kind of people I don't recognize because their careers were like in the 50s and 60s and stuff.
Right.
So it is cool to see some of the stuff. But yeah, and then the guy who plays Dell in here, I believe that's the guy from Breakfast Club, isn't it?
Which character?
The guy who plays Dell. He plays the cop. Yeah.
No, I don't believe
No,
that.
no. Well,
No,
that's what
he
okay.
looks like him, but it's not him.
He would. Yeah, he doesn't. He really, especially now today. Now looking at him,
I want to
he
ask you,
he's
and
known for
because
Suits and what was the other one? Galgameth.
I don't know.
Yeah,
The one thing I have to ask, because this past Halloween season here on the Extreme Movie Show, Professor
yeah,
Post and I, and you to some extent, we've covered a lot of different movies. We did the Karnstein trilogy from Hammer Horror, and it's a series of 3 films having to deal with
Yeah,
lesbian themes of vampires. And we talked, you and I've talked about some other ones like that too.
yeah.
But what did you think of the vampire chicks in here, the 3 ones?
I thought, like I said, for being a kids movie, showing the 3 girls in Dracula's house, and then all of a sudden I'll see him later up, and he's like vampires. It's like, I'm like, man, as a kid, you don't realize like, oh, they're dead, they're turned into vampires. Like it's horrible. It doesn't hit you when you're older. It's like, wow, that is just like disturbing. A lot of murder and deaths in this movie for monsters. And it was aimed towards kind of kids, preteens.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I thought that's another thing too. Dracula with the brides. What does he need the brides for? He needs food banks. That's what he needs. Set up a cattle, plan. But because I mean, it's gonna turn out like Dracula's son. He's like, she's just gonna not want to leave him alone. He's just like, open the door.
Nice,
No,
nice.
but I was gonna say though, the guy who plays cop in here, Stephen Mott, his son is the lead guy in Suits, Gabriel.
Yeah, and you're starting to realize now here,
Yeah, there's a lot of people that are connected.
we're not hardcore nerds when it comes to,
No,
a lot of the news and, hey, this did this box office or like that. We'd like to talk about themes and all that because who really gives a rat's ass unless you're watching something unless a commenter in our chat makes it, makes it known, oh, this person's from this or that. So some people crowdsource information like that, which is cool. It's really interesting with the engagement. But when you have the amount of shows that are out there today, and we've said this before, that a lot of the issue is trying to find something you think will be interesting, and a lot of it's the same stuff. So it's just what variation on a theme resonates with you and what
yeah,
would you appreciate. I think back here in the 80s with less amount of things to watch, there's a bit more of an effort to make something at least palatable and more identifiable to a specific crowd rather than, oh, let's just make something that
yeah.
everybody can watch
There,
or fool with the rating with it so we can draw more people. And that usually doesn't work.
there is one thing though. The way the guy plays the werewolf in this, who hates, he's cursed. And after they kill him, he's like, "Thank you, I'm my curse." I would have loved to see a type of that version of the Wolfman in a movie by himself. In the '80s, early, but we never really got that version.
Yeah, and here's the thing too. Just kind of closing up here a little bit. The only thing I can think of that I haven't said about Monster Squad is it's a movie that what few people that I knew saw it when it came out or over the years when it came to video cassette market and all that
Hmm.
stuff. They loved it. They thought it was a lot of fun, and it's interesting because I haven't really watched this in a very long time until now, and I go, "Yeah, it's definitely older. It doesn't make me laugh like it might have when I was younger, but I still thought it was nice and enjoyable, and
Well,
it really reminded me of, like I say, how little we have of these films."
when we were deciding what movies to basically do on Tuesday, you're like, "Well, how much?" They're like, "Well, that's an easy movie to review." It's like because it's and honestly, it's not an insult because this movie is not nothing to talk home about. But if you've never seen it though, and you're a fan of the Universal horror movies, the older ones, not not the recent, but definitely check it out. The only CG I saw in here is when Dracula is driving his car and his sweet ass, like hood helmets he's got on there, and he's coming down the road speeding, and the cop and his partner are going the other way, and his partner's complaining, like, slow down, you're 100 miles per hour, because he's trying to get to his son because he heard somebody threaten his son over the phone.
Mhm.
And Dracula basically comes out and heads on, and then he basically turns his car into like translucent or basically transparent, basically and like a ghost, and then goes right through them instead of crashing in them. And I'm just I'm like, I'm going back to Ghostbusters with Ernie Hudson, or Ghostbusters 2, and
I
he has
guess.
the train. And I gotta say that's a cool effect.
Yeah,
At the first I've seen with a car do that, where it just becomes, or entangable, whatever it's called, or and I thought that's cool for a limited CG. Of course, the other CG was the portal.
yeah.
There's nothing you could do about it. And I was kept thinking about it, it's like, because I was watching we were watching the movie because we see Abraham Van Helsing and a few other people get pulled into the portal, which we're told it basically, once you get the journal, it says the portal basically goes to limbo, between time and space. And I was wondering, I was like, okay, well, obviously, like, great, because now what's his name's probably dead. He's a human or whatever. I don't know. But at the end of the movie, Dracula gets pulled in, by Abraham Van Helsing, and he gives a thumbs up. I was just like, it's so cheesy, but I love it.
Yeah, I had mentioned at the beginning of the stream about Jean-Claude Van Damme's 63rd birthday, I believe, today. One of the things I always thought about Jean-Claude, and we've talked to us before, good-looking man, nice physique, but he had what I considered to be kind
Yeah.
of like a wholesome look about him. And while everyone loves Chuck Norris in
Yep.
the
Yep.
adult sense as, being like an American role model, I looked at JCVD and thought, Monster Squad, I could see him as like the adult that the kids would rally around or something like that. I see him as like that kind of like icon that could have done something with children. He just has that kind of look to me because he's got that boyish look to him. I know he's older now, but
I would have had him be the creature from Black Lagoon.
well, I mean, he's busy filming Predator and then his own films, right? So I look
He
at it and I
wasn't in
go,
Predator though. He's supposed to be,
he
but
was in it originally, then they had to reshoot it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So it's one of those things where he was still an unknown, but we've mentioned before about JCVD. He's got that wholesome, nice guy kind of personality that no matter what he does, you don't care. You're like, yeah, that's it. Just give me the kicks, give me the flex, give me the splits, give me
Yeah,
whatever. He's likable, and it's weird because very few people in the '80s at this point, action movie wise, were like they were 5, 6 years earlier. And it was John Cloud was one of the few ones that were doing martial arts. Of course, we had Jeff Speakman and Lethal Weapon or Perfect Weapon, a few
the
movies, and
only
what's that?
I would just argue I would not want to have him in a kids movie like this because it'd be like Punisher with Dolph Lundgren. It'd just be awkward.
I don't know. He's a wholesome guy, and so I thought of this movie being wholesome. I thought there's got to be a way where he can do this because the news also came out, I guess, today with JCVD's birthday is that and who knows if it's true. This is not the type of channel we are, but he's like, I wanted to be in the Fast and Furious, but when Vin Diesel
I
heard
heard
that, he
that.
said, I
Yeah,
don't want him, and I'm like, uh,
Vin Diesel didn't want him in the movie, basically.
I guess Vin Diesel's got the stroke, so go figure.
Whether
Anyway,
it's true or not, I mean, I'm gonna glad because that movie's a mess. They got John Cena in there. You don't want to. I don't want JCVD with John Cena. No.
he'd kick his John Cena's ass.
Uh,
You're unable to view me correctly. Kapow!
Speaking of which, I haven't seen Expendables, the new one yet, so I still have yet to see that though. That's
Um,
and
yeah.
I know it's probably bad, and that's the thing. There's a lot of stuff that's coming out, and I'm getting to the point where I'm just kind of like, okay, I've kind of expended. I just can't watch any more Expendables. It's like how
And
many ramble. Imagine if he just kept doing rambles after rambles after rambles. He
did.
was going to that point, but he stopped. Thank God. But I don't want like Ramble Part 12 or.
We're halfway there.
I
Well, this one
but
movie,
yeah,
Monster Squad, was the one that made me think that it was possible in the '80s when they started to reboot a few things and start showing older movies, 20, 30 years old, that Universal had something on their hands with their horror movies. And we, of course, have talked with the flop of The Mummy with Tom Cruise, how the dark universe kind of didn't really get fulfilled. I mentioned movies like The Invisible Man. If you give them to guys that are really great at
Tom
making movies,
Cruise is too big of a star to put him into a monster movie.
I agree with you in a sense, but we also talked about how Dracula Untold was technically, I think, the first one, really, and we liked it a lot. Thought it was really nice
Unless
and
you
brooding.
put him as Lestat again.
Yeah, but that's not Universal. That's Anne Rice.
I know, but you can still do him as being like a Dracula type. Tom
Yeah.
Cruise is Dracula, or just
Make him Leprechaun.
Tom
So,
Cruise as American Werewolf in London.
all right, anything you got to plug for tonight?
Not much. Just Tuesday nights and Thursday nights over at Geeky Puppet Show. I talk about the new comic books coming out this week. So check that out. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. Also, if you haven't subscribed to this channel, what are you waiting for? If you're already watching us and you like our little banter here, you like the movies that we reviewed, I know we're not the most fanciest, we're not showing like, clips of the movie with talking over it, like movie, or was it Mojo?
Let's
Top
do our
10.
first reactions.
Yeah. Yes. It was more a personal kind of thing. But anyway, subscribe here, help us get to 1,000. Share out the stream, share out basically the channel itself. We appreciate everybody basically who shows up and watches it with us. Dave, you're awesome here, man, watching with us. Anybody else who might be watching at home, thank you. And we look forward to seeing you possibly this Sunday.
Sunday night 7 p.m. and Tuesday night 8 p.m. are our flagship shows.
Because it's going to be a little iffy with Halloween. Rob wants to bail for date night.
That's how I got Halloween commitments, bro. That's just how I roll.
He got married at Halloween.
Actually, I did, but that's another story. All right, guys. Thanks for watching. Thanks for
She's a
listening.
vampire. I love her.
Well, if you only knew. RDV, obviously, from the Great Midwest. Have a good night, everybody. Take care. Let us know if there's any particular requests that you have. We're working on building some more content in the channel here as well. So we take your feedback seriously. All right. On that note, guys, have a good night. Stay extreme.
Later, guys.